Do you sometimes feel like your reservoir of sculpture designs are running dry or stale? There is an ocean of ideas just waiting to be tapped internally and externally. Our discussion will begin on the ways of generating ideas. So, most of the literature, I'm just giving you the introduction here. Most of the literature that I read, and there are three books that are referenced in the email you got, talk about how to unblock yourself, how to do little exercises in the morning, how to go for walks, how to go to see a therapist, ways of, making it so you start thinking again. And for me, it's quite the opposite. There are so many ideas out there that pull me forward that I like to think positively about developing, being creative and developing new ideas. And that's going to be the focus of what we're going to talk about today. So, to me, the world is filled with infinite number of sculpture ideas. And the skill, if you can call it a skill, is just to be able to see them, refine them, and implement them. And we're going to talk about that in great detail. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about these skills, 20 minutes or so. Then I'm going to ask you to tell us how you find new ideas. And then we're going to bring up some related topics like the issue of copying and AI. And should we have themes, or is it okay to have sculptures that are not related to each other? And knowing when to quit. I have trouble knowing when to quit. And we want to talk about that. I need your guidance on when to stop sculpting something when I see I'm going down a bad path. So the reference books that I like the best, there's one called A Whack on the Side of the Head. And that is a great book talking about how to move forward and get new ideas. And a lot of that, this is based on that. There's another book called Steal Like an Artist. And I don't like that book because it's just basically saying copying is okay. There is no original art. Just find out who to copy. And I don't believe that's a good approach to trying to get new ideas. So let's start at first about how to get new ideas. So, and I have lots of stories. You all know me. I talk about lots of little stories. So I used to take groups hunting for fossils on the Kansas River. And I would take a group of about 20 people at a time. We go by canoes and we go look for sandbars after the river has gone down. And we form a cordon line, and we walk along the sandbars. These are huge sandbars. And we would find, believe it or not, camels from the previous ice age. We'd find bison antigua. We'd find human bones. We'd find all kinds of relics from 10,000, 100,000 years ago. And we're walking, and I've got people to the left and right of me, and I'm looking hard. And I'm finding things, some things like dogs and cows, but I'm finding some good things. And then there's a woman behind me. She is a student at the university. She's an archaeologist, not a paleontologist. And she yells, look, she's right behind me. She's, look at this. And she finds a spearhead. That's a real special find. I was not focused on looking for any archaeological finds, any pottery, anything. I was just looking for bones, and I overlooked something. So to me, what's important is to open up to sculpture. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, is that looking for everything around you that is sculpture. So today I went to a place called Moss Landing in the coast of California, and we watched the big waves. And I'm walking, and right there is a piece of driftwood. And I look at the piece of driftwood and I go, whoa, that is, and if we could just see a picture of that, you can see it. To me, that looked like something right away. Can you see that? That's from a few hours ago. And right away, I saw what that should be to me. Now, you can think to yourself what you think it might be, but it's a clear purpose for a sculpture. Thanks, Ellie. To me, by the way, I saw a horse's head, Chinese style, but it was there, right? So I like walking on the beach. I like Capitola, where I can walk on China Beach, or around the river by me. I like going to a salvage yard and finding pieces of metal or scrap that might be a sculpture. My friend Darl in Provo, she's always cutting things out of magazines. She gets all kinds of cheap, magazines that are being thrown away by the library or something, and makes a scrapbook of ideas. And she's got volumes of ideas to pull from. Um, Chris, he went to the salvage yard. He picked up a little piece of metal that connects two pipes together, just a twisted piece of metal. And he took a piece of travertine, which is the next picture, and made it into a really neat, simple picture, sculpture out of just a little piece of metal bracket. Is that one there, really? That kind of a neat form. And all it is a little piece of metal that was bent. Thank you. um, I've gotten great sculptures ideas from National Geographic. There's so much in that. You know, they're discontinuing the magazine, so you got to find places to buy old copies or find old copies. I like going to the Museum of Natural History. The one in Denver's great, of course, the one in New York, and I can go through there with my camera and pick up so many ideas for sculpture. So, to me, I actually sometimes feel like Medusa because I go around and I picture everything being in stone. So I see a mother with a kid, a child, and I go, oh, she would be great in Carrara white marble. And I see an eagle. We have lots of eagles in Kansas. I see an eagle landing on a branch, and I go, oh, that would be great in Irish black marble, maybe a white head on the eagle. Or I look at a cloud. I might look at my breakfast and get an idea. I might look at a fossil because I collect these fossils. So it might be a dance I go to. I mean, a performance where I see a flamenco dancer as an example. And in the book, that whack book on the side of the head, it calls this being an explorer. So I'm always going around and I'm always thinking I should be watching and thinking the performance and admiring the musicians. And instead I'm looking around and I'm seeing stone sculpture everywhere. So one other thing that's important is not to discount your dreams. And they say that you can make your dreams solve problems and come up with ideas. You all may have had this experience. So I go to bed and I think about a stone I have and I don't have an idea for it. And then I wake up in the morning and lo and behold. So I have one piece of stone that I knew was probably not going to sell. It was really craggly thing. And I stared at it for 3 weeks, didn't have an idea. I was at a workshop where I was camping out, and I woke up in the morning and that sculpture was done. I saw a Chinese monk wandering the countryside out of this really weird piece of stone. I washed up, I ran down, I borrowed someone's chainsaw, stone chainsaw, and I had that thing done. And other people may not see what I see, but I love that sculpture because it came to me out of nowhere, I guess, sort of in a dream. I had a friend named Roger who taught English at the university, but he taught a class in tracking dreams. So we'd have the students dream and then try to wake up and write down their dream. And by the end of the class, he taught them how to wake up, how to, during the dream, how to control the dream. So he was able to fall off a cliff, all of a sudden you sprout wings and you start flying. And I think we could do that if we put our effort into it. That'd be an interesting project to do. We'll see if we can actually think of sculptures when we're sleeping. He says, always sleep with a notepad. So there's another term to introduce, and it's called cross-fertilization to spark ideas. So an example of this is Gutenberg looked and saw grape presses in Germany. And then he also saw the presses that made coins. And he said, if I put those two ideas together, the vineyard idea and the metalworking idea, I bet I can print on paper. And came up with the Gutenberg printing press. So it's about taking other ideas and pulling them together. So this one guy, Dan, and this is trying to give you examples of what other people have done to come up with new ideas. He was approached in Las Cruces, New Mexico, by the school, the modern dance department. And they said, we would like you to do a sculpture, and then with movement, and then we're going to design a modern dance, and then we're going to put the sculpture on stage, and we're going to dance around the sculpture, what the sculpture means to us. And he did that. I saw the YouTube of it. It was amazing because they were actually imitating the forms of the sculpture. And then when he did the sculpture, he told me he was thinking about people dancing on stage. It was just another way of coming up with an idea. Um, Chet is a stone sculptor and a metal worker in Carbondale, Colorado. So what he does is he finds metal parts, puts them together with his stone parts, and comes up with these gears and these interesting forms twisting around the gears. He's come up with a way. This is a secret, maybe, but I won't tell you how he does it. But he found a way to take metal and spit it into the marble. So he's got rust, little dots of rust inside the marble, along with his metal pieces. Again, I won't mention the methodology, but um, then I went and saw some dances, which were the Cinco de Mayo dances. And I have a stone that's 7 foot tall and kind of like a big piece of pie, a tall piece of pie. And I thought, no one's ever going to buy this piece. And I went by it, just moving other stuff around. And I said, oh, from that dance thing, I said, she is a Mexican dancer. I haven't done it yet, but I'm real excited about sculpting her with some motion in this tall 7 foot skinny piece. And I'm going to take the pleats of her dress, which are pushed out toward the back of her because of all the motion. I'm going to make grooves and I'm going to color them, put in colored epoxy. And I think it's going to be it's in my mind. I've designed it there. I think it's going to be a fantastic sculpture by looking at the dance and combining it in with my piece. I have an idea that I want to use for a workshop sometime, and I haven't figured out how to do it yet, but I'm going to work it out. Origami. I think it would be neat if you've seen the modern origami, not just the swans. If I can get someone to teach origami and then we take stone and sculpt it, I think that'd be a really neat idea. So it'd be a lot of planes, right? A lot of planes all put together in the stone, something I want to work towards. So I try to challenge myself in coming up with this little talk of some topic that's so sort of another area, this cross fertilization that has nothing to do with sculpting. And my wife is an accountant. So I thought, okay, my challenge for this presentation is how can I make a sculpture out of my wife being an accountant? And something that's interesting. So I thought I bought her a little necklace, a little pendant of an abacus, right? A little silver abacus. I thought, it'd be kind of neat to do an 8, just an 8, maybe 2 feet tall, maybe a little twist in the 8. Then I can have the beads of the abacus running up the 8. And then maybe I'll carve the number 8 in Chinese down the side of the piece. And to me, I think that's a pretty neat idea. You're all welcome to steal that. I haven't done it yet, but I just thought there I'm tying accounting, total unrelated field, to what we can do in ideas and stone sculpting as examples. So it is good to have a diversion in sculpting, not be too obsessed, because by doing other things, like in cross fertilization, we come up with ideas. So being a runner, for instance, you might come up with a shoe design or a leg with muscles or a bunch of runners. Or if you are a musician, there's all kinds of things you can do. One musician took a guitar, did it in stone, twisted it so it's a sort of a Picasso abstract cubist guitar, and he got that from looking at the guitar that he plays all the time. So there's all kinds of things we can get, like your breakfast plate of eggs and bacon. We have another picture of some food. Ellie, I lost Ellie. Anyway, so someone did that. They took multiple stones and they made all kinds of different things.
It's upside down.
That's like a sushi plate, right? So
It's
it's got
upside down, sorry.
calcite, orange alabaster, some marble, and I don't know what those round biscuits are, but those are all stone pieces that they made out of their idea of going to a restaurant. Thank you. So we're talking about thinking outside the box, right? And coming up with ideas. And sometimes we want to stretch this traditional ideas. So an example of that is I did a sculpture in a class. I ordered a class at the university in bronze and aluminum casting. It was aluminum. And I worked day and night on this. I was just auditing, I wasn't a student. And I came up with something that I thought was very clever. And I worked, if you've done shell casting, like every 6, 8 hours, I go back. So 2 in the morning, I'm going up on campus and putting another coating of shell casting. Finally cast it and put it together, put it on a big table with everybody else's work. And the professor came over and said, well, I don't know. Maybe if you hang it on the wall, it might look good. But he was looking at different perspective. And I heard about it, this professor. He goes around the room and he takes everybody's sculpture and moves it sideways and upside down. And I've done that too. I see someone, they have a piece, a big pyramid, and they go, if you turn that upside down so the skinny side is down and put a post in it, that could be really pull the eye up on the piece. So it's looking kind of outside the box. Sometimes we can break a piece. There is a guy who sculpts with us from Japan, and he does eggs sometimes. And then he takes little holes and he splits the eggs open. So he takes a hard-boiled egg and he splits it open, and then he puts them back together very close. And so it's not just a boring oval, it has some interesting character. If anybody's seen the work of Isuma Noguchi, he did large basalt pieces. And what he did was, at the museums in New York, in Long Island City, he takes these basalt pieces, which are kind of interesting, and then he cracks them. He feathers and wedges them, he cracks them apart. And then he uses pieces of metal to put them together, maybe 4 inches apart. And all of a sudden, they have a whole new character. So he's broken it apart and put it back together again. There's a sculptor in Pennsylvania now, I believe, Barry X. Ball. And what he does, he goes to museums and he offers to digitize their sculptures. So if they're destroyed or fall apart, they'll have a good image of them. Then he takes those images and he stretches them. So you've got Michelangelo's David with the face being another like 50% longer or wider. He distorts them on his computer, right? Then he takes them to his CNC machine, which is another topic we'll talk about in a bit. And then he reproduces it in the most exotic stones he can find. So he's taken something we all know and then made it look totally different by changing the form. But again, we'll talk about the whole CNC issue. So last week, we're talking about the senses here, about what we see and think about, what we wake up to. So it was 2 weeks ago, and a guy came to my studio in my yard, totally blind. He's been blind for many, many decades. He has been a sculptor for more decades than that. He came from Michigan. He now lives close by to me, but he was teaching art at West Michigan University. And so I took him around to feel the stones. And we went into the alabaster barn, and I had several smaller ones. He doesn't work real large, like 20, 30, 40 pounds. And he felt all the pieces. And I gave him a rasp so he could also feel what they feel like with the rasp. And most of this was the clear Italian alabaster, Italian ice. He went around, he said, this is the one. I feel the sculpture in this stone. He's a good sculptor. And so that's the one he got, but it was all tactile and nothing visual or auditory to pick his piece. So I thought that was really interesting when he said, this is the one. So part of this, of course, is not overthinking. And I have a problem with that. When I used to paint and I do this, I think about the hair and the nostrils and I get kind of carried away. And sometimes it's best to kind of step back and say, how do I simplify this? So this is kind of a joke, but I'll just read you this section. This is Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson went on a camping trip. They pitched their tent under the stars and then went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Holmes awakened and exclaimed, Watson, look up, tell me what you see and deduce. And Watson opened his eyes and said, I see billions and billions of stars. It's likely that some of these stars have planetary systems. Furthermore, I deduce there is probably oxygen on some of these planets, and it's possible that life has developed on a few of them. Is that what you see, Holmes? Holmes replied, no, you idiot. Someone stole our tent. So, anybody get that? So the point is that sometimes we overlook and we can step back and say, maybe it's just some simple solution to maybe achieve a beautiful form. So like Ryoichi Suzuki teaches at Utah State. He takes the human form and he simplifies it to its very basics of just a simple, beautiful form, and it has such movement in it. And he accomplished just fantastic sculptures because of it. So the other thing to mention about is sometimes we just have to use emotion. So it might be politics, and we have a lot to think about to stimulate our ideas now. Empathy, disgust, kindness, maybe the nostalgia of your family. I thought someday I'd like to do a totem pole of my family coming over and living in the Lower East Side. And my grandfather used to sell onions, and I thought that could all together make a kind of interesting sculpture for me. Or looking at other cultures. So there's another sculpture, belly of the candle with the black top, that last sculpture, the white candle. Okay, so in 2016, something happened in the United States that discouraged me, not saying what that is. And so I thought it was kind of a black time. So I got this piece of Colorado marble and I put on a big piece of black obsidian. So it is a black candle. It's about 7 or 8 feet tall. And I embedded red travertine and Belgian black marble toward the bottom, little pieces put in black, had a lot of drill holes in it. You can see, scan it up and down. But it was something that was really driven by my dour feelings at the time when things changed in the country. Okay, thanks, Ellie. So that can drive us as well to come up with ideas. And there's also a great beauty in imperfection. So you might have heard the Japanese words, wabi sabi. That means nothing is perfect. So one painting I've always liked is The Potato Eaters by Van Gogh. So it's just a dark scene with craggly people who are living on the edge. It has such emotion in it to me. Imperfection. I would say imperfection before he got on to other topics. When I get a load of stone in a container, I unload with a big forklift, and inevitably something falls off, right? I've got it imbalance, it's not the right balance, falls to the ground and cracks. My helper or the truck driver goes, "Oh no, that one broke." I look at it and go, "Oh, that one's mine." Sometimes those forms just talk to me right away with ideas. There's beauty in fragments. So a lot of people call and say, I want something that's 16 1/4 inches by 4 1/3 inches and, very specific. And I say, what are you doing? And they say, well, I'm doing a leaf. I go, well, that's not the form to do a leaf in, right? So we go and find the right piece. But sometimes there's just beauty working directly in something that's got a shape already. And I'm sure you all know about direct carving versus indirect carving. Indirect carving is you have a model basically or a picture to work from, and direct carving is go to it. You and the stone have a relationship and carve together. So when I have workshops and the beginners come and they look at the stone, they stare at it, and it goes on for 2 or 3 hours, and they're afraid, and they go, well, I don't want to ruin the stone. I said, it's limestone, and there's many tons, you can't ruin it. I'll give you another one. So I give them a pitching tool, and I say, I'm going to first break off one piece with your permission, which I do. And I say, here's the pitching tool. Now you go to it and start knocking stuff off. All of a sudden their eyes light up and they go, oh, now I start to see things in here because they're making the imperfections in the stone and having it talk to them. So the other thing I want to mention is that sometimes when we have ideas, we have to let them evolve. So I'm going to give 2 examples of this. So Kathy, a friend of mine who teaches up at Marble, Colorado, and she had a piece of stone from me that she was going to do a sculpture for me. And we talked a little bit about it. Kathy was an industrial designer. So she took her sketchbook and in a matter of minutes, she drew 12 different pictures of what you could do with that stone. She said, you like any of these? I said, wow, great. But like this one is really pretty neat. She drew 5 more pictures based on that design. I said, well, that one is just like perfect. She wouldn't stop. She's kind of compulsive. And she went ahead and she did 3 more pictures. And then I chose that and she sculpted it and it was fantastic. So another example is I was from the computer background and I started working with a professor who just retired as the sculpture professor at KU. He's also the one who started the International Sculpture Center and Sculpture Magazine. So I was really lucky because I became his apprentice for 2 years. And he started me out by saying, well, what do you want to sculpt? And I said, I'm not sure. And he gave me 10 lumps of clay about the size of a double golf ball, a potato. You've got 20 seconds on each one. Sculpt something quick. I did 12 sculptures, some longer, skinnier, wider, hole in it. Then he said, take your favorite one and do 3 sculptures. Then take your favorite one of that, just like Kathy did. And that one, he said, that one you can modify. Now you can touch it more than 20 seconds. Modify that, expand it, let it evolve, and then that's the one we're gonna make into a bronze. It was a bronze, made it into a bronze sculpture. Oh, we had me enlarge it. Sorry, went from a potato size. We made it into something that was like 18 inches tall, and then we made the molds and the burnout and everything, waxes and everything, in the process of letting it evolve. So it was a real interesting experience for me of seeing an idea and letting it become better. And sometimes then a moderate idea with these tweaks can become a real good idea. An example of this, which is not related to what we do, let me just get something off my screen here. There was a company and they had this great idea. They're going to put grass seed in dog food. And then when the dogs pooped, they would plant new grass. And the dog food company said, what do we care about that? And people should be picking up the poop anyway, right? How many applications are we going to have for that and make it worthwhile? So the company said, all right, well, forget about that. And then someone said, there isn't a whole other application for this. We could put this into cow feed. And then when the cows poop on the pasture, they'll reseed the pasture. They said, we have a sellable product, right? They let it evolve into something different based on their original concept without abandoning it. So not all ideas, of course, are good ideas. And if you think about it, if we hit 40% of our ideas are good ideas, aren't we better than most major baseball players? So you have to expect some failure here and there. And a person comes over and this older woman, and she said, I want to do a ballerina in stone, limestone, no less, on point. In other words, on the tip of their foot. And I said, that will not work. That's a bronze sculpture. That's not a stone sculpture. But then we said, but have you thought about doing it in a bas relief? And she said, oh, no. How about that? So she took that idea, which was a bad idea, and made it kind of into a good idea. My mom used to live near Monterey Bay. So I was there visiting, and I saw 3 dolphins coming up. You know how they do that? That side by side, they come and break the surface. And I said, oh, that is a great sculpture. Went home. I had a real interesting stone to do it with, black with pink veins in it. And I sculpted it. It came out well, but quite frankly, it's at my place. It's boring. To me, it's really boring. It's just 3 dolphin backs with fins, right? But I looked at it, I said, if I redid that as 5 dolphins in a great big donut, so 5 dolphins swimming in a circle and put it on a pedestal, that would be kind of neat. And then went back and did that sculpture, but based on the first sculpture. And I'm really proud of that one because it became an idea that was a bad idea that became a good idea. Now, sometimes we need to abandon ideas. So I'm going to give you another personal example, recent one. So I was walking in my yard and I saw a stone called stazema. It's like a conglomerate, right? So it's Carrara marble and a lot of white, blue lines in it and stuff. It's kind of really neat. And I looked at it. This all took place in 60 seconds. And I said, and I go by it, I've gone by it 1,000 times before. If I stand that up as a column and put 2 hands on the side, I could put a big ball on it with a bunch of faces from different ethnicities. My theme is diversity. So I thought of it and I said, the next 30 seconds was, and I'll call it human matrix because it's a matrix of stone. What a great idea. Took it out. I made big bronze hands. I made them out of clay and brought them to the foundry, and they did that. And it was a big job finding 4-foot diameter plexiglass. I learned how to do vinyl cutouts to put the faces on. And as I'm going along, I'm going, I'm not so sure this is a good idea, And but I made such an investment. Psychologically, I made such an investment that I went along and went along. And I submitted it to the city, and the city actually accepted it. And it is 8 feet tall. And it's sitting in our downtown at our major intersection. And I walk downtown every day, 6 days a week. And every day I walk by my sculpture and I go, oh crap, what was I thinking? And I don't really like it. Now, today they accepted another sculpture, just today, that I'm working on that I'm happy with, another diversity sculpture. And I told them my intention is to take the human matrix sculpture down and put this one up, which I shouldn't have really worked with. I will note though, that when I remove the ball and it's a column with 2 hands, I've already thought of another way of putting something in those hands that will be very interesting, with a big, basically disc that's 4 foot in diameter with faces on it. So it'll evolve into something nicer eventually when I get to it. So don't, you get crazy ideas, you decide whether to proceed, and then if practical, move ahead. So it was James Joyce who said, a person's errors are the portals of discovery. And that is the point of it, okay? So at this point, by the way, one other thing that whack on the side of the head, one of the closing remarks in his book was, there are 4 steps to being creative. The first is explore, which I mentioned before, look around and find ideas. The second is artist, see if that idea could be worked into something for us aesthetic or meaningful or has a message. The third is judge and decide whether it's a good idea or not, which I should have decided better with my human matrix sculpture. And the fourth is being a warrior. And that means now that you've decided and you think it's a good idea, implement it. Get into action, pick up your chisel and hammer or your saw and make it happen. Explore, artist, judge, warrior. Okay, enough introductory comments to throw a bunch of ideas at you. The first thing I want to ask, if we can, I don't know, want to unmute everybody, Ellie, or I don't know how you want to do it, but the first thing is what motivates you? And I wrote down in the thing I sent around was morels or amanita muscaria. Now, I don't know if any people know what that means. That means it might be a fine dish of gourmet mushrooms that you eat that stimulates an idea, or it might be an hallucinogenic mushroom that makes you think outside the box. I'm not encouraging that. We had a workshop where there was a guest speaker, and the guy came, and his topic was creativity. And there was all these people, including young kids, and they said, well, how are you creative? And he goes, LSD, you should all be using LSD. And that kind of was a big shakeup. And I know it's California here and Colorado, not Kansas, but he was asked to leave, by the way. But I'm not really encouraging that. But can people tell me if you thought about it, how you get ideas? Yes.
Oh, okay. I've only done one piece in 40 some years out of one block of stone. All the pieces that I do are just a piece that comes right out of the quarry, and the shape determines generally what I'm going to do. And for me, that's a creative process that I love. I'll take a pile of stone and I'll move them around and stand them up and lay them down, and that's where I get my ideas for most of my abstract pieces. Also for some realistic ones too. And I just find that that's an easier path for me. A square block of stone doesn't inspire me at all. Even if I knock the edges off, it still does not do anything for me.
So I would consider you a direct sculptor, right? So you go to the stone,
Yes.
and you decide what you want to do, as compared to saying, I'm doing this head,
Yes.
daughter, that's got to be these dimensions. Right. That's good. So Sal does these, I'd call them laminated projects, where he puts different stones together. And it might be the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland, or he just finished a big turtle out of brown marble with white extremities. And I don't know if you put the eyes in yet, but he comes up with these ideas, a butterfly made of like 8 different colors of stone. And they are amazing.
Thank you.
Where the ideas come from?
um,
LSD?
as I'm saying it, I'm gonna show off my turtle because you brought up the eyes, and that's been a point of contention for me. So I did just finish my turtle, and he's pretty big. And I got him on that's a piece of just sandstone from the Pacific Ocean. That's a natural form in there, anhydrite. And this is Carrara marble with agata alabaster. And I sort of like whimsical reality, like stylized figurative work. So this is sort of on my like sea area here, and then it's all dark over here, but then I have my like Alice in Wonderland whimsical stuff. But my thing is just I like to marry different stones together, typically colorful translucent stones. But when I see something, I don't see it in one piece, because like a snail has a shell and then the foot or the body and the head, the caterpillar sitting on a mushroom, yeah, if I had a big enough stone, I could carve it all out of one thing. But I just see things that in reality, in nature, are different components, which are often different colors. And some people think it's sort of sacrilege to do that.
No.
They feel like a sculpture should just be one stone, but I don't. I just go for it. So anyway, I've taken up enough time. Thanks.
No, that's great. Good examples. Very good.
Thank you. I'll mute myself again. Oh, by the way, thanks for putting this on, and I appreciate you guys offering it to non-members, but I went ahead and joined because I just think it's a worthy thing that you guys are doing this, and I'm enjoying it.
That's what we want. That's good.
And we're glad to have you.
And there are many benefits. Anybody else want to talk about how they come up with ideas?
Well, there's a project I did with a stone from yours, if you remember, that Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend who had a very interesting story of his youth. It involved a piece of metal from a truck. It was a hood ornament from a Mack truck from the 30s that was a memento of his youth from his father. It was very special to him. And he asked me to make a sculpture for, as he called it, Little Mac. It was the bulldog hood ornament from a Mack truck. And so I had to somehow incorporate the chrome pieces of a Mack truck hood ornament structure with something stylized of a hood or grill of the truck in order to mount the Little Mac piece again and recreate it. So it was an interesting study, first to find even the parts from a 1935 Mack truck, and then form them to marry them with this piece of Tennessee marble to make him a home for his Little Mac. And it worked out quite nicely.
It came out wonderful. The stone he used was a reddish brown. It had a reddish brown hood with the stainless steel on top with the Mack, with the bulldog, and it is a Mack truck, a small Mack truck. It was great. Inspired by your friend. That's wonderful.
Inspired by his story.
Mm-hmm.
And it meant so much to him that he wanted to somehow keep that in a way that was not just a piece of metal.
Right. Right. Anybody else want to contribute about coming up with their ideas? Stevie.
Yeah, I like what I do to have some kind of a little story, and sometimes I've been influenced by dreams or daydreams, doodles, things that I'm not trying to do, just unconsciously coming out my hand. And so that's what I like, is to say something kind of overtly instead of trying to have people guess what I mean. Does that make sense?
Sure. And part of this is we talk about not being, sometimes quitting a project. Sometimes you just have to go what you feels good to you. So like when I had that sculpture that I envisioned when I woke up in my tent, I don't get very many people recognizing it because it's sort of real abstract, but I really like the sculpture. Forget about the way it came to me. I like the sculpture. And it's important to do something that your heart is into, not just what people expect from you, of course. Okay, so I'm going to bring up another topic, and this is related to
Wait,
something.
can I stop you for a second?
Certainly.
So I would like to make a suggestion for people to think about, because we've been thinking, what are we going to do with are we doing a next tool time? And if people would like to, we could have people load their pictures that they'd like to share, and that we could maybe talk about what inspired them and what they want to say about it, and maybe doing it kind of like a salon. And maybe you could lead us through that, Miles.
But it won't be a critique.
No.
Yeah, I've discovered that if you critique your customers, you don't get repeat business. So everyone's sculpture that I've seen most of your pieces, they're all wonderful. Absolutely fantastic.
But that would be a lovely way to share if people are
Sure,
willing,
sure.
if people would like to do that.
Our
next time.
other ideas, we talk about doing one about Italy, and I was going to see if we had time. I'm not sure we're going to have time today, but talking about how Italy's stone got formed and where to go, and sort of a tour guide. And that's a topic we may want to cover if people are interested in that, since I go every year. The other question, this related to what Sal said before, is that should we aim for a theme? Okay. Art galleries say we want you to develop this sort of uniform design, and we expect that every time. That's what sells, right? When I began, I was doing all kinds of stuff. I like Mayan, so I was doing a lot of Mayan and Chinese design. I still like that. But then I got onto the topic of diversity because of politics, and I feel very impassioned about it. Grew up in New York, so diversity is important. And all my latest projects are just driven by that theme for me. And I want to get more diversity sculptures in my downtown, of course. Should we try, and I've been told when I've been with in workshops, you need to come up with an idea that you carry through on many sculptures. Should we try to do that? That's a question for you all. Should we try to find one thing that we think we stand out, or maybe it's from our heart, like we spoke about before, and do that theme on and on? Or is it okay to just do what moves us in the moment? Is there any opinions about that? Yes, Stevie.
Oh boy, I do. I mean, I go from wanting to do realism to doing abstract to, oh, that stone's so beautiful. And I hear you about what galleries say to have a theme go through your work. I don't even do that with my 2D work. It's like limiting. I feel like it's limiting possibilities. And it's like what you said about challenging yourself. It's like, oh, wow, maybe I could do that in a way that, speaks to me. So I don't know about the theme thing. I understand it, but for me, I just don't think that would work.
Mm-hmm.
Although I love horses. That's it.
You're all random sculptors or theme sculptors? What do you consider yourself? Not you, Sal, because you clearly are, I say theme driven in lamination, but design is all different. So
You're saying about like certain works are recognizable, like a T. Barney.
moving
You know,
in
if I see a Mobius
the
strip,
way.
for the most part, I'll think it's a T. Barney. Nothing wrong with that. He's very recognizable and, you know, marketable. I go in a lot of different directions, but I still think my people probably would recognize my work if they, see it on. They'll say, "Oh, okay, that's another one of his laminated colored pieces." So, and I don't know if there's anything wrong with that. It's just different. Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. Somebody else want to add to the theme?
Looks like Jeff was trying to say something.
Jeff?
Okay. So I was saying that it's interesting that you used the morel and amanita idea because both of those are one of my themes. I carve little jade morels and I'm actually showing them at the Red Sky Gallery right now. And I like to I'm trying to perfect it. You know, I'm trying to make the perfect morel all the time. And I look back to the first ones I made and they're terrible, but I was really proud of them at the time. And now a year in, I'm getting really good. And well, I'm a lot better than I was. And, people are starting to actually be interested in them. So that's a positive sign, I'd say. But I love to try other things as well.
No,
Sometimes it gets boring making morels. It gets boring making morels, but I like, I want to build a collection, but I also want to keep trying other new things.
Butter and a little bit of garlic.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I should carve some jade butter and jade garlic cloves to go along with them.
That'd be great. Sometimes people develop.
I love the shark.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I love that picture of the charcuterie plate you showed earlier. That already got me thinking about making jade sushi rolls or little sushis out of jade or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, I can picture a plate with 4 or 5 different kinds of mushrooms on it all together. Oysters and chanterelles and boletes. I'm getting hungry. Sometimes people find it good to do a theme that they can then sell at a place that's related to that. So a guy did a pub golfers theme. Oh, there's a guy in Canada. He does race cars out of my fanciest stones, like Potoro and stuff. These things are about 24 inches long, 7 inches high, 16 inches wide, and they are fancy. They're mostly done by CNC, but they're really fancy. Then he takes them to racetracks and car shows, or like to those auctions, Barrett Jackson auctions, and sells these things for big bucks. He loves the cars. He loves what he's doing, but he's also found an outlet to sell them.
I'll say something. I'm a beginning sculptor. I just started when coronavirus started, and I'm a holistic psychiatrist. And so I get my ideas through praying to the muse, or looking inside and asking the feminine aspect of my psyche to guide me, tell me what to do. And I've been loving that process. At the moment, I think, doing a series is something that makes sense if there's something that's, I would say, coming through you. And I had a patient who was having trouble seeing faces in nature, which is, you see, there's a face in the tree and the stump of the tree or whatever. And he was seeing it all over the place, and it nearly drove him psychotic. And so I've found lots of faces in nature, especially in wood. And when I do, I pick it up and I put it somewhere. And then I'm like, well, if I ever got good, I would do a series called Faces in Nature. And so that's just sort of, for me, what's happened. But also, that's not all that I've done. I also have a totem animal. and I've been inspired to honor my totem animal by sculpting that, which is a vulture. And I spent a lot of time, and I don't really feel like it turned out obviously as a vulture. Some people would say, "Oh, I'd say, what is that?" And they'd say, "Oh, that's a seagull." And I'd be like, "Damn it, that didn't really make the vulture proud." So I keep working on it. So I
Excellent.
just wanted to contribute that idea about, stuff sometimes comes in a series, and that's it.
That's great, Gary. I mentioned about walking on the beach this morning and seeing this piece of driftwood, and I said, "There's a horse." I mean, there's obviously a horse. So there are, as we say, if you look around, you see things everywhere. And if you focus on seeing the faces in nature, then there's going to be a lot of faces everywhere you look, right? That's wonderful.
Yeah, if you're not scared of them, you're
That's
not
right.
afraid they're going to drive you nuts.
Yeah, you can't get exotic about it. Eric, did you want to say something?
Yes, so I've been working mostly from clay and doing bronze. And when recently I started to work with steel, and what I can do with steel is completely different, because the material is different, the way you work with the material is different. So I end up by having something which is completely different from the style that I had with the bronze. And when I do stone carving, it's also something completely different because the material doesn't call for something similar or that I can do in bronze or steel. So depending on the material I use, I end up by having sculpture which don't look at all the same. And even though I like to work in series, so when I do my bronze, I have a specific style for the bronze. But when I look at my steel sculpture, it's completely different. My stone carving is completely different. And so, and I don't know how, if you work on different material, you could have something consistent over the different materials.
Why, I would think so. I mean, I'm not saying you should, but the guy that used to work for me is Nick, this great sculptor. And Nick he found a barrel of triangles, little triangles from metal triangles from the scrapyard. And he welded them together and made a great portrait head. So working with steel doing a portrait, doing a bust, or stone doing a bust, or wood doing a bust. I mean, that shouldn't look the same, You could have a theme and then have different approaches with your different media. And that's a great thing, working with different materials.
Oh yeah, I agree. You can have a theme, but the way you end up, the way things look like are completely different depending on the material, I would say.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You're not going to get bored.
Yeah.
That's great. So I do want to ask about this issue of copying a little bit and AI, one short story. So a guy is at a workshop and he goes to one of the sculptors. This is real. This is the sculptor is Katusha from London. And she's telling me the story. She said, he came over to me and he asked for my maquette. She does sort of Mobius, but not really, much nicer. And she takes metal and wire and twists it, and that's her maquette. And she says, he came over and he wanted the maquette, and I gave it to him. And I yelled at her. I said, make him do his own thing, Why should he copy your work? He did buy a stone from me. I should be grateful, right? And then he worked on this for the full workshop. And then I looked at it and she looked at it. And I should mention, Katusha works diligently and has an MP3 player. And she recognizes people's shoes. She memorizes shoes. So if I come over, she knows I'm not going to come over unless it's important. And she'll talk to me. If the head of the workshop, Madeline, comes over, she recognizes her shoes. She'll talk to her. But lots of tourists come through. She sees kids' shoes, other people, and she just basically doesn't talk to them. And whenever this guy came over after he took the model, she would turn the angle grinder so the rooster tail, the stone dust coming out, would go in his face. So she basically was chasing him away. At the end, I saw the sculpture on the last day, and quite frankly, it was awful. It was awful. It was two-dimensional. It didn't have the beauty all around it. It was a very poor design. I went to Katusha and said, he didn't do a very good job. And she said, I know. See, I knew what I was doing by letting him copy, but not really doing a good job. So, I mean, there's excuse another poem, okay? And I know we're getting late on time, but this one's by T.S. Eliot, okay? You mind if I do a little diversion here? So he said, this is about poetry. Immature poets imitate. Mature poets steal. Bad poets deface what they take. And a good poet make it into something better, or at least something different. The good poet welds his theft into a whole of feeling which is unique, utterly different from that which it was torn. So taking someone's ideas and making them your ideas differently, unlike what that guy did with Katusha's piece, I think that's acceptable, but to a point. And if people, they really do call me all the time and say, I want the same stone as Ellie because I want to do the same sculpture as her. And I just get, you really? I mean, I'm polite, but should think of their own idea. Do people have an opinion about this copying? And then I'll expand that. So now we have AI, right? So I can go on, I can go, give me a form like TIFF's, and I want it to be curved like Arliss's, and it will mesh them together, and I can have a new design based on other people's work and then implement it. Any feelings about the copying or the use of pieces of other people's work through AI to do their piece?
There. Okay. I had a piece copied in China. My Chinese daughter called me, and she said, Arliss, you've got to look on I don't know, it's Facebook or something. There's your piece there. And it happened to be in the city that she lived.
Huh.
She went to see it because it was in a gallery. And she said, well, part of it looks a little like yours, but it's not three-dimensional. It's got a flat back where yours was nice and round. And I said, and she said, aren't you upset? And I said, no, not really, because it's not really mine or a copy of mine. It's just somebody's idea of what mine looked like. So I figure, you just go with the flow. There's nothing you can do about it. But as far as the AI thing goes, I'm not really for it. I'm sorry. As being an artist, I don't really feel that it's the greatest. But I think it's up and coming and going to be with us for the rest of our lives.
Sure. Eric?
Yeah, I was asking myself that question just a few days ago. And I was thinking of using AI just to find some new ideas, not to try to take pieces of other people's work, but just ask questions and iterate on the ideas that the AI comes up with, and try to find ideas faster like this.
And like T.S. Eliot said in that little story, you can take the ideas, and if you modify them to be your ideas, then it's absolutely legitimate, of course.
Yeah, and something I used AI also to find some title for my pieces.
Sure.
And I don't consider this is, I still consider this is my ideas, because I'm pushing the AI until I'm happy with the result, and it's a kind of a loop that I create, and I stop when I'm happy. And so I don't know what is your opinion about this. I'm interested in hearing that too.
As long as it's your idea in the end. I'll mention two examples, by the way. One, based on what Arla said, there was a show, and this person came around, Anglo, not someone Asian, and said, oh, I love your sculpture. Would you mind if I took a picture? So I took a picture at every 22.5 degrees. The person didn't realize what was happening. But sure, take a picture. They took a picture, they moved over, took a picture. And then a few years later, they went by an office building, and there was their sculpture blown up like 12 feet tall, but it was clearly their sculpture, exactly their sculpture. So they went to the designer basically and said, "That's my piece." And they said, "Well, we just got it from a catalog and those Chinese made it for us." So she had her attorney contact the building owners and got compensation because it was clearly her sculpture. And as you may know, this last year in 2023, there was a Supreme Court case. Anybody know about that case where the Andy Warhol Association sold a picture done by Goldsmith by a photographer. They took the picture, Warhol, when he was alive, took the picture of Prince, the musician, and modified the color. So it was clearly the same picture, but made it so that his face was purple and his hair was green, and it was just modified, and then sold it to Condé Nast magazine, I believe. And so Goldsmith sued the association that they sold something that belonged to her, even though it was modified in color. The US Supreme Court held last year that that's her photograph. And the fact that he changed the colors doesn't change that she has the ownership. And they had to compensate her for the copyright violation of her work. I thought that was kind of interesting. So, there's that line where Arliss's piece is now two-dimensional, but if it's an exact copy, and they say there's no original art, of course, I'm always concerned that I do a piece, I come up with an idea, and did anybody ever do this before? I want to do something outside the box, of course, and make sure I'm not infringing on somebody else. Anybody have any other comments about copying and AI? Stevie?
It's a confusing thing. When I was a graphic artist, we used to do all that magazine cutting and getting reference material, for drawing. And I would like to do sculptures, but I get scared that somebody will think I'm copying because somebody did a torso, and I currently feel like I want to, but I don't want to because other people have been doing torsos. I mean, sometimes I just feel like I don't know what's okay to carve, I did the Mobus because I never had done it before. And it's not that I think it's a great sculpture or anything, but it was a learning piece. And sometimes I think being influenced by somebody and then taking on that kind of ability to understand what they were doing is a little important. I don't know, for me.
But you can always modify something.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll give you one example. Okay, so this guy, Jerry, good sculptor. Just give me a sec, Tiff. He's a good sculptor, and he did a torso, a plain white torso. I thought, God, that's way below him. I mean, that's simple. Then he took out his texture tools, and he did a sash, and he did something like a scarf just by using texture. And all of a sudden, that torso became so alive with these like 4 or 5 different textures. So you can modify something that seems simple like everybody else has done and make it something your own, of course. Tiff.
Earlier you asked about, what was it? Sorry, my brain just went completely blank. That's how it goes, right?
Copying?
You asked about not copying, no, about having a style and versus, exploration. And I think it's a false dichotomy that plays into this because it really depends on what your purpose is, right? If your purpose is something commercial or to sell things or to say, this is my mark on the world, this is who I am. I think that kind of artistry demands, some sort of originality and to, really kind of pour your heart and soul into it. But if you're doing it for your own enjoyment, which I think a lot of sketching, I think a lot of the work that goes into those kinds of like great works, this is who I am. I think copying and learning and emulating or whatever else is perfectly fine if your intention isn't to sell it and to say, this is an original. I've done a very deep dive in, or not very deep, but I've done a pretty deep dive in AI. And I use it not for art, but for business purposes right now. If I need to generate, like an email blast that I'm sending out to a bunch of people, I say, hey, write this email blast that tells all these people this thing that I need to tell them. And it's kind of terrible. But the beautiful thing about it is that I don't have to face that blank piece of paper, or that blank screen anymore. I get to now say, okay, this is terrible, but that means I know how to make it better. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of AI, and where there's this nice overlap with art, where you don't have to face that blank canvas, or the perfectly square block. You can say, do something kind of like this or whatever, and then you can say, that's terrible, I can do better, and then you go and do better. So just my 2 cents.
No, that's good. Not just taking it right off the AI and sending it out as a memo, which most people say is awful. If you do that, you need to make it better. It's true with art too.
It's
if you
so bad.
find a design, and you go, I kind of like this design, and I see other people have done it, but I'm gonna modify it with texture or elongate it or do something different with it for sure. So it is a little bit over. We're not going to cover the Italian discussion today. I'll give you one more word today. Let's see. Oh, I want to ask you about one more topic, if you don't mind, about CAD CAM. So I do sell stone to companies that have robots, because we talked about that earlier. And I just wanted to see what people felt about that. So that guy who does the race cars, he's sanding them, he's finishing them, but it's being done by a very good sculptor who owns a robot up in Canada. And I know when I used to do bronze casting, I would do the clay, and then the foundry, like the hands on my sculpture, he does the rest. So am I really the sculptor? Is he really the sculptor, And with CAD CAM, a stone could be just sent up, and you give them your design, and then they produce 1 or 40 copies of the same thing. Anybody have opinions about using CAD CAM and robots to do their stone sculptures? It's not cheaper, but it's faster.
I have observations about it. Whether they're right or not, I don't know. I think it's another tool. So if you look at it like that, before they had, variable speed angle grinders, did they think we were cheating when we broke out the variable speed angle grinders and everybody was using, hand carving?
Good point.
But and they're making the model first, so they're making the design, and then the robot's only bringing it down 90%, and they're doing the last 10%. So is it just a time saver? It's built off there. They could have got there anyway. But all that being said, I think it's terrible. I think it's not it. It just takes away the heart and soul of stone carving and sculpting to me. So, but on the other hand, I have had a water jet sort of cut out an inlay for me so I could place another stone, because I don't have the precise, no matter how good of a sculptor, and I don't know how they did it back in the day, but inlay is very difficult if there's any thickness to it to get it balanced and without big gaps. And I had a water jet cut a piece of marble out for me. I felt like I cheated doing that. So I don't know.
Not. Jeff, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I have similar thoughts. I'm sorry, I missed his name. The last
Sal.
who spoke. Sal. I have similar thoughts on that, and one thing I think, you know, I haven't sold many items, but the ones that I have, it feels like I have a connection with the person who's buying it, and it feels like there's a little bit of each one of our souls reaching into the piece. Like I created it from inspiration, and then they're appreciating whatever they're getting out of consuming it by, you know, having it or having it around to look at. And so that connection sort of centers in the piece. And then I don't know if that piece can be mass produced 100 times, it feels like you're just watering down that connection or cheapening it. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I can see my grandpa was a carpenter and he used hand tools to build houses, and I'm a carpenter and I use battery operated Makita power tools to build houses. So I'm sure he would have appreciated those in his time.
I'll mention two things. One is I like, you know, finding these words that apply to what we do. So there's a Greek word, it's called meraki, Meraki, and it's defined as to pour yourself into a piece so that you leave a part of your soul behind. That's what Jeff was talking about. Is actually that when I look at a piece like I have the one I'm working on now, I'm really feeling it's representing me. And I'll mention a negative one is I went to a show and a guy had 4 large Indian sculptures. So Geronimo, Sitting Bull, and others, they're big. I mean, they were like 4 or 8 times real size. And they were in white marble. And I looked at them, and I'm not very intuitive. I'm more analytic from my background, the way I think. I looked at these 4 sculptures, and I studied them, and I said, you know, technically, they're perfect, right? The eyes were perfect. Everything was perfect. But something bothered me about them. And I went over and said, excuse me, I sell stone. I'm just curious what is this stone? Where did it come from? Because I couldn't recognize it. He said, oh, I don't know what it is. I just sent a picture to China and they use their machines and they reproduce it. I was able to see that there was no soul in these sculptures. And you could tell the difference. I was proud of myself. I was able to tell the difference. So with that, we're a little bit over on time. I thank you all for coming, and I hope you're all real creative in your work, and you go around on the beach and you look at faces in nature and come up with ideas. And I think we'll all produce wonderful things. And I hope we can, as Ellie said, we can share them maybe on a Zoom meeting, maybe everyone showing a couple of their works. I think that'd be really interesting. And with that, any other closing comment from anyone?
A good example of a sculpture with no soul is the Martin Luther King one in the Black Museum in Washington, D.C.
Yes. There was a lot of anger about
That
that.
was done in China.
That's right, by machine.
Yes.
Absolutely.
No soul.
Absolutely. Fred, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to again say thank you very much, Ellie, and the association for allowing us guests to tune in. And I think I will, like the other speaker, join the association out of gratitude, and hope to participate further in later productions.
They've got the good journal that Arliss produces and a lot of information. The old journals have loads of interesting articles. So there's a lot of benefit to being a member of NWSSA. Okay.
And if you have something you'd like to share with the group and feel like you'd like to do a presentation, everybody is really welcome to contact me and we can see what we can do. Be happy to chat with you about that.
And then hopefully,
welcome to our group.
The group. And hopefully in the near future, we'll talk a little bit about Italy. And I'll encourage you all to meet me there and we'll go and have gelato together. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a good evening and we'll see you all soon.
Enjoy the rest of your trip.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
All right.
Thank you, Mike.
Take care. Good night.